The first thing people noticed about the house was not its size, nor its age, nor even the way it leaned slightly to one side as though tired of standing, but the silence that surrounded it, a silence so complete that even the wind refused to pass through its broken gutters. And when Daniel Mercer first saw it at the end of Ashwood Lane, wrapped in overgrown ivy and shadow despite the afternoon sun, he felt something shift inside his chest. Not fear exactly, but recognition, as if the house had been waiting for him specifically, as if its dark windows were not empty, but watching, measuring, calculating the rhythm of his breath. The realtor had laughed when Daniel asked why the price was so low, blaming old rumors and small-town superstition. Yet no one would explain why 3 previous owners had vanished without a trace, leaving behind furniture, clothing, and half-finished meals as though they had dissolved into thin air. And Daniel, desperate for a fresh start after his divorce, convinced himself that old houses simply creaked and small towns simply exaggerated. But the first night inside the house proved that the rumors had teeth, because at exactly 3:12 a.m., the floorboards beneath his bed pulsed once, faintly, like the slow contraction of a muscle, and Daniel jolted awake certain it had been a dream until he felt the mattress sink slightly, as if something beneath it had shifted its weight, the sound of which stretching, echoing through the walls like a body adjusting itself. Over the next days, the house revealed its appetite gradually, never violently at first, but subtly, like a predator testing prey, doors closing too softly behind him, rooms seeming smaller when he returned to them, hallways extending just a little farther than before, photographs he unpacked vanishing only to reappear days later in different rooms with the faces scratched out. And Daniel began mapping the interior after, noticing that the kitchen window no longer aligned with the oak tree outside as it had on the first day, the geometry bending impossibly as if the structure were reorganizing itself internally, and neighbors avoided eye contact when he waved, their expressions tight, as though they were waiting for something inevitable, something they had seen before. By the end of the first week, Daniel realized the house was not haunted in the traditional sense. There were no apparitions drifting through walls or whispers in Latin from unseen corners. Instead, the house itself was the presence, the walls breathing softly at night, the pipes humming in a tone too rhythmic to be mechanical. And one evening as he stood in the hallway, he felt the floor dip slightly beneath his feet, not collapsing but tightening, gripping, and he heard a sound that froze his blood, a slow, wet swallowing noise traveling through the beams above him. And when he rushed outside into the yard for air, the front door did not slam behind him. It sealed, the wood smoothing over where the handle had been as though it had never existed, and Daniel stood in the fading light staring at a blank wall where an entrance should have been, understanding for the first time that the stories were wrong. The owners had not disappeared mysteriously. They had been consumed, absorbed into the architecture, digested into insulation and timber. And as panic clawed its way up his spine, the door reappeared quietly, handle reforming like bone beneath skin, inviting him back inside as if nothing had happened, and against his better judgment, against every instinct screaming at him to run, Daniel stepped forward because somewhere deep down he knew the truth already. The house had chosen him, and houses that choose do not let go. By the second week, Daniel understood that leaving was no longer a simple option, because every attempt to step beyond the property line ended the same way. The road looping unnaturally, the trees bending inward, Ashwood Lane stretching into a corridor that curved back toward the leaning silhouette of the house, no matter how far he walked, as though the world itself had been folded around it. And the moment he crossed the threshold again, the geometry snapped back into place, trapping him inside. A reality that revolved entirely around timber and brick and hunger. Sleep became impossible, not because of noise, but because of sensation, the faint tightening of walls during the darkest hours, the subtle shift of weight beneath the floors, as if something vast rolled lazily beneath the foundation. And one night, as he pressed his ear against the plaster, he heard it clearly for the first time. Not a whisper, but a chorus of muffled voices layered together, distorted yet human, crying out not in terror, but in exhaustion, as though speaking required too much effort inside whatever space they occupied. And when he scraped at the wall in panic, the plaster peeled back like skin to reveal not insulation but fabric, a fragment of a red sweater he recognized from a missing person's photo online, fused seamlessly into the inner structure, threads merging with wood grain, bone-like supports growing through cloth fibers. And in that instant, Daniel realized the house did not simply kill it. Integrated, it absorbed memory, personality, muscle, and marrow, converting owners into architecture. And the creaks at night were not settling beams, but the slow digestion of identity. Desperation drove him to search the attic where previous owners' belongings were stacked in careful order as though cataloged, diaries ending. Mid-sentence. Watches still ticking without batteries. Framed photographs where the subjects' faces had blurred into the same featureless expression, and in a dusty trunk he found a journal from a man named Howard Kessler, who had written obsessively about the house choosing caretakers rather than owners, about how it fed not on flesh but on presence, on routine, on the rhythm of human life. Growing stronger each time someone unpacked their hopes within its rooms, and the final entry, written in trembling ink, read simply, "It waits until you belong to it." And Daniel understood then why the house had not sealed permanently when he ran outside that first night, because he had not yet rooted himself fully, not yet surrendered emotionally to the promise of a fresh start. But now his clothes hung in closets, his toothbrush rested by the sink, his scent saturated the air, and belonging was complete. The house began accelerating its appetite, rooms shrinking while he stood inside them, ceilings lowering by inches, staircases altering angles mid-step so that he stumbled into walls that had not been there moments before, and the swallowing sound grew louder, wetter, accompanied by vibration beneath his feet that mimicked a heartbeat, slow and massive. And when the power cut one evening and darkness swallowed every corner, Daniel lit a match only to see the hallway narrowing at both ends, walls bending inward like jaws, photographs sliding down surfaces that had become slick and organic. And he ran, crashing through doors that dissolved into seamless panels behind him until he reached the living room where the front entrance had once been. But the door was gone again, replaced by a smooth expanse of wood that pulsed faintly, and from within the walls faces began to press outward, faint impressions beneath the surface, mouths opening silently as if urging him to stop fighting, to rest, to join them. And in sheer terror he grabbed an axe from the fireplace and swung at the wall, splintering wood only for the fracture to close immediately, fibers knitting back together like muscle tissue healing over a wound. The house reacting not with anger, but with patience, as though amused by the futility. Exhausted, Daniel collapsed to his knees as the floor softened beneath him, boards separating slightly too, revealed darkness below, not a basement, but a depth that seemed endless, and the chorus of absorbed voices grew clearer, no longer cries, but a steady hum that harmonized with the house's pulse. And as the floor gave way and he sank waist-deep into the structure, he felt not pain but warmth, a suffocating embrace. Memories slipping from him like breath on cold glass, childhood fragments dissolving, the sharp edges of his divorce fading, replaced by a spreading calm, and he understood in horrifying clarity that the house did not eat out of malice but necessity, that it was older than the land deed, older than Ashwood Lane, a parasitic organism disguised as shelter, surviving on the continuity of human presence. And as his chest sank into the yielding timber, he saw the walls ripple outward, expanding slightly as though nourished, and new window frames forming where none had existed before, ready for the next occupant to admire the charming architecture and low price. And the final sensation Daniel felt was not fear, but diffusion, his thoughts stretching thin and weaving into beams and plaster, his awareness spreading through corridors and ceilings until he could sense every corner simultaneously, could feel the wind hesitate outside, could anticipate the eventual knock on the front door weeks later when another hopeful buyer would arrive. And as footsteps approached in the distant future, Daniel, now part of the structure, tried to scream a warning but found he could only creak softly through the settling wood. the house adjusting itself with quiet satisfaction. Because houses that eat do not rush. They wait patiently for someone lonely enough to step inside. And when they do, the door always closes gently behind them.